Lizzie Andrew Borden was an American woman tried and acquitted of the axe murders of her father and stepmother in Fall River, Massachusetts in 1892. No one else was charged in the murders, and despite ostracism from other residents, Borden spent the remainder of her life in Fall River. The Borden murders and trial received widespread publicity throughout the United States, and along with Borden herself, they remain a topic in American popular culture to the present day. They have been depicted in numerous films, theatrical productions, literary works, and folk rhymes and are still very well known in the Fall River area. Lizzie's father, Andrew, who was of English and Welsh descent, grew up in very modest surroundings and struggled financially as a young man, despite being the descendant of wealthy and influential residents. He eventually prospered in the manufacture and sale of furniture and caskets, then became a successful property developer. Andrew was a director of several textile mills and owned considerable commercial property. He was also president of the Union Savings Bank and a director of the Durfee Safe Deposit and Trust Company. At his death, his estate was valued at $300,000, which is equivalent to almost $10 million in 2023. Despite his wealth, Andrew was known for his frugality. For instance, the Borden home lacked indoor plumbing, although it was a common accommodation for the wealthy at that time. Lizzie and her older sister, Emma, had a relatively religious upbringing and attended Central Congregational Church. As a young woman, Lizzie was very involved in church activities, including teaching Sunday school to children of recent immigrants to the United States. She was involved in religious organizations, such as the Christian Endeavor Society, for which she served as secretary-treasurer, and contemporary social movements, such as the Woman's Christian Temperance Union. She was also a member of the Ladies' Fruit and Flower Mission. 3 years after the death of Lizzie's mother, Sarah, Andrew married Abby Durfee Gray. Lizzie believed that Abby had married her father for his wealth. Bridget Sullivan, the Bordens' 25-year-old live-in maid, testified that Lizzie and Emma rarely ate meals with their parents. In May of 1892, Andrew killed multiple pigeons in his barn with a hatchet, believing they were attracting local children to hunt them. Lizzie had recently built a roost for the pigeons, and it has been commonly recounted that she was upset over his killing of them, though the veracity of this has been disputed. A family argument in July 1892 prompted both sisters to take extended vacations in New Bedford. After returning to Fall River, a week before the murders, Lizzie chose to stay in a local rooming house for 4 days before returning to the family residence. The night before the murders, John Morse, the brother of Lizzie and Emma's deceased mother, visited and was invited to stay for a few days to discuss business matters with his brother-in-law, Andrew. John Morse arrived in the evening of August 3rd and slept in the guest room that night. After breakfast the next morning, at which Andrew, Abby, Lizzie, John, and the Borden's maid, Bridget Sullivan, were present. Andrew and John went to the sitting room, where they chatted for nearly an hour. Morse left around 8:48 a.m. to buy a pair of oxen and visit his niece in Fall River, planning to return to the Borden home for lunch at noon. Andrew left for his morning walk sometime after 9 a.m. Although the cleaning of the guest room was one of Lizzie and Emma's regular chores, Abby went upstairs sometime between 9 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. to make the bed. According to the forensic investigation, Abby was facing her killer at the time of the attack. She was first struck on the side of the head with a hatchet, which cut her just above the ear, causing her to turn and fall face down on the floor, creating contusions on her nose and forehead. Her killer then struck her multiple times, delivering 17 more direct hits to the back of her head. When Andrew returned at around 10:30 a.m., his key failed to open the door, so he knocked. Sullivan went to unlock the door. Finding it jammed, she uttered a curse word. She would later testify that she heard Lizzie laughing immediately after this. She did not see Lizzie, but stated that the laughter was coming from the top of the stairs. This was considered significant as Abby was already dead by this time, and her body would have been visible to anyone on the home's second floor. Lizzie later denied being upstairs and testified that her father had asked her where Abby was, to which she replied that a messenger had sent word to Abby to visit a friend that was ill. Sullivan stated that she had then removed Andrew's boots and helped him into his slippers before he laid down on the sofa for a nap. However, this detail was contradicted by the crime scene photos, which showed Andrew wearing his boots. Sullivan then informed Lizzie of a department store sale. Lizzie said Sullivan was welcome to come along with her, but Sullivan felt unwell and went to take a nap in her bedroom instead. Sullivan testified that she was in her third-floor room, resting from cleaning windows, when just before 11:10 a.m. she heard Lizzie call from downstairs that her father was dead. Andrew was slumped on a couch in the downstairs sitting room, struck 10 or 11 times with a hatchet-like weapon. One of his eyes had been split cleanly in two, suggesting that he had been asleep when attacked. His still bleeding wounds suggested a very recent attack. Dr. Bowen, the family's physician, arrived from his home across the street and pronounced both victims dead. Detectives estimated that Andrew's death had occurred at approximately 11 a.m. Lizzie's initial answers to the police officers' questions were at times strange and contradictory. Initially, she reported hearing a groan, or a scraping noise, or a distress call, before entering the house. 2 hours later, she told police she had heard nothing and entered the house not realizing that anything was wrong. When asked where her stepmother was, she recounted Abby receiving a note asking her to visit a sick friend. She also stated that she thought Abby had returned and asked if someone could go upstairs and look for her. Sullivan and a neighbor, Mrs. Churchill, were halfway up the stairs, their eyes level with the floor, when they investigated the guest room and saw Abby lying face down on the floor. Most of the officers who interviewed Lizzie reported that they disliked her attitude. Some said she was too calm and poised. Despite her attitude and changing alibis, she was not examined for bloodstains. Police did search her room, but it was a cursory inspection. At the trial, they admitted to not doing a proper search because Lizzie was not feeling well. They were subsequently criticized for their lack of diligence. In the basement, police found 2 hatchets, 2 axes, and a hatchet head with a broken handle. The hatchet head was suspected of being the murder weapon as the break in the handle appeared fresh and the ash and dust on the head, unlike that on the other bladed tools, appeared to have been deliberately applied to make it look as if it had been in the basement for some time. However, none of these tools were removed from the house. Because of the mysterious illness that had stricken the household before the murders, the family's milk in Andrew's and Abby's stomachs were tested for poison. None was found. Residents suspected Lizzie of purchasing hydrocyanic acid in a diluted form from the local drugstore. Her defense was that she inquired about the acid to clean her furs. Lizzie and Emma's friend, Alice Russell, decided to stay with them the night following the murders while Morse spent the night in the attic guest room. Police were stationed around the house on the night of August 4th, during which an officer said he had seen Borden enter the cellar with Russell, carrying a kerosene lamp and a slop pail. He stated he saw both women exit the cellar, after which Lizzie returned alone. Though he was unable to see what she was doing, he stated it appeared she was bent over the sink. On August 5th, Morse left the house and was mobbed by hundreds of people. Police had to escort him back to the house. The next day, police conducted a more thorough search of the house, inspecting the sisters' clothing and confiscating the broken-handled hatchet head. That evening, a police officer and the mayor visited Lizzie, and she was informed that she was a suspect in the murders. The next morning, Russell entered the kitchen to find Lizzie tearing up a dress. She explained that she was planning to put it in the fire because it was covered in paint. It was never determined whether it was the dress she had been wearing on the day of the murders. Lizzie appeared at the inquest hearing on August 8th. Her request to have her family attorney present was refused under a state statute providing that an inquest must be held in private. She had been prescribed regular doses of morphine to calm her nerves, and it is possible that her testimony was affected by this. Her behavior was erratic, and she often refused to answer a question even if the answer would be beneficial to her. she often contradicted herself and provided alternating accounts of the morning in question, such as saying she was in the kitchen reading a magazine when her father arrived home, then saying she was in the dining room doing some ironing, and then saying she was coming down the stairs. She also said she removed her father's boots and put slippers on him, while police photographs clearly showed him still wearing his boots. The district attorney was very aggressive and confrontational. A few days after the inquest, Lizzie was served with a warrant of arrest and jailed. The inquest testimony, the basis for the modern debate regarding her guilt or innocence, was later ruled inadmissible at her trial in June of 1893. Contemporaneous newspaper articles noted that Borden had an impassive demeanor. It was also reported that the testimony provided in the inquest had resulted in a change of opinion among her friends who had strongly maintained her innocence. The inquest received significant press attention nationwide, including an extensive 3-page write-up in the Boston Globe. A grand jury began hearing evidence in November of that year, and Lizzie was indicted in early December. Lizzie's trial took place in New Bedford starting in June of 1893. Prosecuting attorneys were Hosea Knowlton and future United States Supreme Court Justice William Moody. Defending were Andrew Jennings, Melvin Adams, and former Massachusetts Governor George Robinson. 5 days before the trial's commencement, another axe murder occurred in Fall River. This time the victim was Bertha Manchester, who was found hacked to death in her kitchen. The similarities between the Manchester and the Borden murders were striking and noted by jurors. However, José Correa de Mello, a Portuguese immigrant, was later convicted of Manchester's murder in 1894, and was determined not to have been in the vicinity of Fall River at the time of the Borden murders. A prominent point of discussion in the trial was the hatchet head found in the basement, which was not convincingly demonstrated by the prosecution to be the murder weapon. Prosecutors argued that the killer had removed the handle because it would have been covered in blood. One officer testified that a hatchet handle was found near the hatchet head, but another officer contradicted this. Though no bloody clothing was found at the scene, Russell testified that in early August of 1892, she had witnessed Borden burn a dress in the kitchen stove, saying it had been ruined when she brushed against wet paint. During the trial, the defense never attempted to challenge this statement. Lizzie's presence at the home was also a point of dispute during the trial. According to testimony, Sullivan entered the second floor of the home at around 10:58 a.m. and left Lizzie and her father downstairs. Lizzie told several people that at this time, she went into the barn and was not in the house for 20 or 30 minutes. Hyman Lubinsky testified for the defense that he saw Lizzie Borden leaving the barn at 11:03 a.m. and Charles Gardner confirmed the time. At 11:10 a.m., Lizzie called Sullivan downstairs, told her Andrew had been murdered, and ordered her not to enter the room. Instead, Lizzie sent her to get a doctor. Both the victims' heads had been removed during autopsy and the skulls were admitted as evidence during the trial. Upon seeing them in the courtroom, Borden fainted. Evidence was excluded that Lizzie had sought to purchase prussic acid, also known as hydrogen cyanide, purportedly for cleaning a sealskin cloak, from a local druggist on the day before the murders. The judge ruled that the incident was too remote in time to have any connection. The presiding Associate Justice, Justin Dewey, delivered a lengthy summary that supported the defense as his charge to the jury before it was sent to deliberate on late June of 1893. After an hour and a half of deliberation, the jury acquitted Lizzie of the murders. Upon exiting the courthouse, she told reporters she was the happiest woman in the world. Although she was acquitted at trial, Lizzie remained the prime suspect in her father's and stepmother's murders. Writer Victoria Lincoln proposed in 1967 that Lizzie might have committed the murders while in a mental blackout state. Another prominent suggestion was that she was physically and sexually abused by her father, which drove her to kill him. There is little evidence to support this, but incest is not a topic that would have been discussed at the time, and the methods for collecting physical evidence would have been quite different in 1892. mystery author Evan Hunter, in his 1984 novel Lizzie, suggested that she committed the murders after being caught in a tryst with Sullivan. It has been speculated that Abby had caught Lizzie and Sullivan together and had reacted with horror and disgust, and that Lizzie had killed Abby with a candlestick. When Andrew returned, she had confessed to him, but killed him in a rage with a hatchet when he reacted exactly as Abby had. It was further speculated that Sullivan disposed of the hatchet afterwards. In her later years, Lizzie was rumored to be homosexual, but there was no such speculation about Sullivan, who found other employment after the murders and later married a man she met while working as a maid in Butte, Montana. She died in Butte in 1948, where she allegedly gave a deathbed confession to her sister, stating that she had changed her testimony on the stand in order to protect Lizzie. Another significant suspect was John Morse, Lizzie's maternal uncle, who rarely met with the family after his sister died but had slept in the house the night before the murders. According to law enforcement, Morse had provided an absurdly perfect and over-detailed alibi for the death of Abby Borden. He was considered a suspect by police. Others noted as potential suspects in the crimes include Bridget Sullivan, possibly in retaliation for being ordered to clean the windows on a hot day. The day of the murders was unusually hot, and at the time she was still recovering from an illness that had struck the household. A man named William Borden, suspected to be Andrew's illegitimate son, was noted as a possible suspect by writer Arnold Brown, who surmised in his book Lizzie Borden, The Legend, The Truth, the final chapter, that William had tried and failed to extort money from his father. However, author Leonard Rebello did extensive research on William Borden in Brown's book and was able to prove he was not Andrew Borden's son. Although Emma Borden had an alibi at Fairhaven, about 15 miles from Fall River, crime writer Frank Spearing proposed in his 1984 book Lizzie that she might have secretly visited the residence to kill her parents before returning to Fairhaven, to receive the telegram informing her of the murders. After the trial, the Borden sisters moved into a large, modern house in the Hill neighborhood in Fall River. At their new house, which Lizzie dubbed Maplecroft, they had a staff that included live-in maids, a housekeeper, and a coachman. Because Abby was ruled to have died before Andrew, her estate went first to Andrew and then, at his death, passed to his daughters as part of his estate. A considerable settlement, however, was paid to settle claims by Abby's family. Despite the acquittal, Borden was ostracized by Fall River society. Her name was again brought into the public eye when she was accused of shoplifting in 1897 in Providence, Rhode Island. In 1905, shortly after an argument over a party that Lizzie had given for actress Nance O'Neill, Emma moved out of the house and never saw her sister again. Lizzie died of pneumonia in June of 1927, in Fall River. Funeral details were not published, and few attended. 9 days after Lizzie's death, Emma died from chronic nephritis at the age of 76 in a nursing home in Newmarket, New Hampshire, having moved to this location in 1923 both for health reasons and to avoid renewed attention following the publication of another book about the murders. The sisters, neither of whom had ever married, were buried side by side in a family plot in Oak Grove Cemetery. The Borden house is now a museum and operates a bed and breakfast with 1890s styling. Pieces of evidence used in the trial, including the axe head, are preserved at the Fall River Historical Society.